So Jannik Sinner's backhand is already taking its place amongst the great backhands in the history of the sport. Hawkeye data from 2024 came out, and his ball spin is 400 RPMs higher than Novak Djokovic's on average, while having an average ball speed that's higher as well. We can have an argument about whether or not his backhand is better than Novak's, but we certainly can't argue that it is not a great shot. And we're going to have a look at the backhand today and see if we can pick up a couple of things that might be helpful. So without further ado, we're going to see some footage from the side here in slow motion. These are balls that are hit more a little bit at the body, which is great because it allows us to also highlight some footwork that will be very useful for people in learning how to handle balls a little bit on the inside. So one of the first things we're going to look at here is just this early stage preparation on how he handles these balls that come at the body a little bit. And we're going to see what he does with this left foot. He's going to step the foot behind him. Now, a lot of players make the mistake when the ball comes a little bit at the body is they take this right foot and they step it across, and it's just not as efficient a movement pattern as moving with this left foot and stepping it in behind the body. This really takes the left hip and pulls it out of the line of the ball. And we're going to see that as he does this, he's going to turn the hip structure, rotate the foot. So notice that the foot's pointing at the side fence here, and he's turning the hips and shoulders at the same time. So by the time this foot lands, he's already turned his whole upper body, his hips, his shoulders to the side, and he's not going to need to do any more trunk rotation in preparation. So we see as the rest from here, he's just developing the rest of the stroke with the hands and the arms, but he's already made that big unit turn. So what this does is it allows him to prepare super quickly, which when you've got ball speeds coming in at 70, 80, 90 miles an hour from your opponents on the ATP Tour, you don't get a lot of time to prepare. And so this is a great thing to emulate at home, is that this big unit turn happens along with this first step. So by the time that first step really hits the ground, he's already prepared his upper body and his trunk and his hips for what he needs for the rest of the stroke. And so from here, if he needed to, he could just do a racket drop and execute a pretty solid backhand. Of course, in this case, he has a little bit more time, so he's not going to do that. Now, this brings us to probably the only element of Sinner's backhand that I'm not in love with, which is just this elbow kind of being popped out a little bit at this stage. Now, given that he is able to develop the rest of the stroke just fine, we'd probably turn this a little bit more cosmetic rather than functional, but it is not something that we see a lot of the other great backhands in the history of the sport with the two-hander will have that elbow a little bit more tucked. But we're going to see that as the stroke develops, he does rotate the elbow underneath and gets to his extension position. So we're not going to flip out about it. One of the big things that I want everybody to pay attention to at home is this, that the racket is well above the hands. So in this first turn, this unit turn, he's kept the hands lower and the racket head higher. And that's going to allow him to create this really nice big circular shape with the rest of his backswing through contact. Now we like curves in the backswing because they allow us to build speed efficiently. Anytime we have a corner or a stopping point, that means that we have to accelerate the racket again from scratch, which makes it harder to generate power in a controlled fashion. So once we've got this big unit turn here, what Sinner's going to do next is just develop the rest of the swing. So we have the racket above the hands. We know that we want to get the racket below the hands and below the contact point to hit a good heavy ball. And that's exactly what he's going to do. So he's going to extend back behind him and straighten out that left arm and roll the elbow more underneath and drop the racket head. And so we're going to see this is about as low as that racket's going to get. We're going to see here that contact is going to be not quite that low or that high. Contact's going to be somewhere around this height. I want you to see that the racket is well and truly below the height of contact, right? And so as he comes up through the rest of this shot, he's driving up and through the ball. And this is a really important idea, is the up and through part. And so he's going to swing more like this. And what we see a lot of players do because they're trying to generate their topspin, I'm just going to superimpose, is they start out just fine and then they pull up sharply with the racket trying to get more topspin. And what ends up happening is it's feeding into this whole really long standing old idea for topspin of brushing the ball. But we don't really want to brush the ball. If I brush the ball, I'm not putting a lot of energy into the ball. And so what ends up happening for a lot of players, right, at this point in the stroke is because they pull up, they bend both the arms, they end up kind of chicken winging the follow through, and they lose a lot of power without really getting the topspin that they're looking for because they're not putting much energy into the ball. Whereas, if you see Sinner here, he's going to drive up and extend through the contact on this upwards plane. Now, if I prepare properly and I have the racket down below the contact height like he does here, as long as I swing up and through and I don't have a super open face, I'm going to get topspin. That's the whole point of having the backswing the way that it is and generating the stroke the way that we do is you're going to get topspin. At this point, the work to get topspin's already happened, so you don't need to try to add extra work to get topspin down the road or at contact. That's not happening. The ball's on the strings for 0.005 of a second. That's 5 milliseconds, right? The racket travels less than an inch before the ball leaves. And so you're not going to magically add topspin at the last second. All you are going to do is mess up your stroke. And so we have this long drive up and through the ball, and he generates a ton of power and a ton of topspin. So the other big thing we're going to have a quick look at here is we've looked at this in other ground strokes. He takes this big bracing step, right? So yes, he steps forward big into the ball, but what we're going to see is he's actually going to push back off this lead leg to stop the body coming forward and get this rotational power going. So we can see right here, rotation of the trunk, rotation of the hips, release of the hands and arms, right? And this is how we get big power off the ground strokes. I'm going to notice that he's not pushing up, right? He's not loading and pushing up off this lead leg. That's not how he's generating power. He's staying level and he's rotating around with his hips, and his hips are pulling the shoulders and the shoulders are pulling the hands and the racket. Um, and this is a technique that we see all over high level tennis. For power generation is not this massive step through the shot. High level players, elite ball strikers, are not trying to generate momentum through the shot. They're using strategies to maximize their rotation for power, and that's exactly what Sinner does here. So you can see that he's got this line that he's created for his rotation, and everything's just staying still. So like this is where the power really launches. Look at how the body's not translating forward through this phase. And then the big release. And so when we look at how we want to hit our backhand, just to recap here really quickly, we are going to get that nice big unit turn. We've got that out step, even though he's stepping the foot behind him. You notice how he turns the foot to the outside along with the big unit turn. Develop the rest of the backswing with the racket above the hands. Then we get the nice racket drop down into the slot. He's below the height of contact. And then we get massive rotation with the hips and shoulders, power in the racket up and through the ball. And again, we don't want to try to brush the ball at contact. We want to drive up and through to get a high degree of energy into the ball, which lets us have both velocity and spin. If you have any questions, you want to argue about whether or not Sinner's backhand is better than Novak's, leave comments below. Hit us up at DMs and have a happy holidays.